Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this very special event. My name is Emer O'Hurley and I'm the Festival Director of the West Cork Literary Festival. I'm delighted to present this event to celebrate Winter Papers Volume 7. We're joined this evening by the co-editor Kevin Barry and three of the contributors, Alan McMonagle, Jess, Raymon and Susanne Stich. This is the very last event in a year-long West Cork Literary Festival in which we presented a mix of live Zooms, events pre-recorded in Bantry, writing workshops for Bantry schools and outdoor events in front of an audience. And by my calculations, this is our 81st event this year. Many of these are available to rewatch on our West Cork Literary Festival YouTube channel. All of our festival events are made possible by the support of our funders, the Arts Council of Ireland, Cork County Council and their Library and Arts Service, Fáilte Ireland and the Creative Europe programme of the European Union. All of the books featured in our festival events are available from Bantry Bookshop, and we would encourage you to support them or your local bookshop wherever you live. I'm now going to introduce you to Kevin Barry. Kevin is the author of 3 novels and 3 short story collections. His awards include the Impact Dublin Literary Award, the Goldsmiths Prize and the Sunday Times EFG Short Story Award. He also works as a playwright and screenwriter, and he lives in County Sligo. His latest collection of short stories, That Old Country Music, was published by Canongate in October 2020. Alongside Olivia Smith, Kevin is the co-founder and co-editor of Winter Papers, which is why we're all here today. Kevin will now introduce us to Alan, Jess and Susanna, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.
And thanks so much, Emer, and thanks to everybody who's tuning in out there. We're recording just about as we come up to the solstice time, the very shortest day of the year, the armpit of the year here in South County Sligo. I can tell you all. I think we're coming to you during that long indigestible week between Christmas and the New Year, so I hope we're going to provide mild diversion from that kind of strange week. So this is a celebration of Winter Papers number 7 here, which is coming in heartwarming crimson tones this year with a hare on the cover. I've been agitating to have a hare on the cover for years now because they are of occult significance in Irish folklore and life, and they're just kind of beautifully weird animals. We used to have one in the field outside our house where myself and the co-editor Olivia Smith live in County Sligo. He used to visit every night over the summer around dusk time for a while. It was a very memorable time. We christened him Hendrix, because it was often around the time we were having a gin and tonic of the evening. So that was the lovely summer of Hendrix the Hare. We're going to talk about lots of interesting stuff today. Can we all just unmute for a second just so we can all say hello? And today we have joining us Jess, Raymon, Susanne Stich, and Alan McMonagle. Jess, where I think you're a Montrealer originally, but based now in Dublin.
Yeah, I moved here from Canada in 2015, but yeah, I'm in Dublin, so I'm currently in Dublin.
Yeah, are you a native Montrealer? You were.
I didn't grow up in Montreal. I moved there and spent my 20s there completely, and then I moved here. I think I was 29 or 30. But yeah, no, I grew up originally in Saskatoon.
Okay.
So that's in the prairies.
Yeah.
It's very flat. The joke is that, like, if your dog runs away, you can still see him 3 days later. That's kind of the joke.
I've done time in Montreal. Did about a year there a few years ago. Not in the jail sense of doing time. I spent about a year in the city. It's an amazing place. I loved it. I was really struck by. I was teaching some. I don't usually teach writing, but I had a kind of workshop thing at Concordia, and I was amazed by the distances that the students would tell me they were driving home at the weekend, like 18-hour drives.
Yeah,
up the road.
But it changes so quickly. Like now, to think about like a 4-hour drive does seem very far.
Yeah. Ireland is 4 hours long and 2 hours wide, and that's about the size of it. The great much missed Irish writer and philosopher John Moriarty taught in Canada for a number of years, I think in Quebec, but said he had great difficulty dreaming because of the kind of length of the horizons. So all very strange. But we
Like
could
his dreams at night.
yeah, he found it a difficult place in which to dream. But having grown up in with very little Kerry mountains all around him. Susanna, you're just up the road from me, I think. Are you in Donegal?
Technically speaking, yes, but right now I'm actually in Nuremberg in the
Oh.
kitchen where the piece starts. That's
Oh, fantastic.
I'm going to talk about. This is my mom's kitchen, and these are her plates, by the way.
So
Kitchen I grew up in.
yeah, so you're just back for a visit?
Yeah, I'm just visiting her for a week.
But you've lived in Ireland now for how long? For
Oh, for 20 years.
Wow.
I've been up in the Northwest for about 20 years now. And
Yeah.
before that in Dublin and Galway.
and you took to what you're in Inishowen, is it? In the Inishowen
In the show,
Peninsula? Oh,
yeah.
it's beautiful. Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning, and it's very unspoiled.
Yeah.
Not that many people know Inishowen, you know, it's people go to Donegal, but not so much to Inishowen, and it's really a stunning place.
Yeah. And you're a lifer now. That's where you're set. That's where you're going to stay, do you think?
I think so, but these days you can't be sure of anything.
Yeah.
Can you?
I know.
I love it there. I really do love it, but I mean, who knows?
Who knows what's going to happen? Yeah. And Alan, you're in Galway City?
Go away all the time, yeah, Kevin.
All the time. How's it going down there? That's our nearest kind of metropolis, so we're often down and about in Galway. How's things? How are you getting on?
Oh, we're limping through the days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a bizarre spell of time, but yeah, we spent a lot of the last 18 months sort of inventing walks and finding new paths and new routes that sort of take in part of the streets and a bit of the outlying the trees and the woods. Barna Woods now, I find, has been
fantastic. Yeah, no, you do. It does force you to kind of pay more attention to what's closer to home, doesn't it? And kind of to revel in that. That said, at this point now, if I ever see another fucking cow, like I'm dealing with out here, it's kind of the same old walk again and again. Yeah, it's funny. Like we did one of these events last Christmas for the West Cork Festival, and we were saying, "Oh, see you all next summer, and everything will be."
I know.
But we limp out of it. We will limp out of it eventually, I'm sure, and get there. So just if you're watching at home, we are just going to kind of chat and kind of talk at tangents and ramble away without any huge crazy structure. But I am going to go to each of the contributors in turn now, just to hear about their contributions to Winter Papers. If you haven't come across it before, it's a lovely anthology of stories and essays and interviews and photography and visual art and all sorts in it. So Jess, you've contributed a story this year to us called The Understudy, which is an absolute runaway train of a story. And it's you've made a very interesting formal decision at the start, where it's one unbroken block of text. It's a single run-on paragraph, which can be very daunting as an editor when it comes into the door going, Jesus, this is a dense piece of text. Do you think before you write a story about how it looks on the page? Is that something that you focus on quite a bit, about the actual space, the physical space of the page?
Not really, like in terms of the physical space, no. I was just thinking about it in terms of, I guess, the character. Like the character doesn't understand, like since she's speaking, she doesn't understand like a break. She's not going to stop. So it didn't come in terms of thinking about how it would look. It just came through as like, I can't make her stop, so the page isn't going to make me stop,
She's an incredibly vivid first person presence. So will you give us a little reading and we'll meet her.
You can tell a lot about a person from the way they act around the dead. From first time Charlotte heard a corpse groan, her face went chalk white, tears galore, and she was off like Roadrunner to phone her fiancé. On the other hand, take Comby, a real master. His first hyperallergena was a sight to be seen, a cold one, a woman, flat on the gurney, and Comby wheels her up the ramp, and all of a sudden, with a whooping crack, up shoots the woman's torso. And with the agility of a ninja, Comby sucker punches her in the face and, Senor? All right, sure, I'll go back to that night. So I walked into the morgue. Charlotte was leaning against the sluicing sink, spooling surgical thread. Any new bats in the cave? I said, more to Comby. And his guttural goose laugh chimed off the stainless steel walls of the main freezer where we do the autopsies. Never enough bats, Auntie, but too many bodies, 2 new ones today, he said, and pointed to a blimp with track marks, and then to Mercedes, your daughter. So I blessed myself, as I do, unless it's a well-known rapist or murderer. See you, Auntie. Comby was out the door. He was on shift the next morning. Mondays are the most popular day for funerals in New Mexico. Most people wouldn't know that, but I think it's useful to know when the dead are most alive. Charlotte tried to make conversation, but I kept it short and did my stock take. New supplies had come in, not the usual gallon bottles of dark chili-tinted liquids, but pint-sized bottles with rosy tangerine fluids, a brand called Eco Bomber. I thought this had to be a mistake. We'd been using frigid fluids for over a decade. So I asked, what's this eco crap? And without looking up, Charlotte said, Santorino asked me to order it, which was strange because David was away at his mandatory doctor training course last week during our stock take, so must have phoned it in. Embalming fluids without formaldehyde? Oh, sweet Lord, I said. It's 60% essential oils. This couldn't preserve a dried out armadillo. And Charlotte just shrugged, like preserving bodies wasn't our livelihood. Like carrot juice would give a gangrenous corp a lifelike glow. But I dropped it and asked, do either require an internal? Pointing to the new bodies. She sauntered over to check the charts and said, just external. And I said, well, the big guy is yours after the break. And I decided to start on your daughter, Mercedes, myself. For an external autopsy, I began by photographing the body. The sheet gets pulled off and I take a few snaps. I take more when a full autopsy is ordered, but these days there are so few, apart from sudden death or foul play. I can't believe how incurious people are. And of course, no doctor would suggest an autopsy. It can only expose their error. Anyway, like most chokers, Mercedes' chin was tilted up. I bagged clippings of her hair and nails, mandarins. Her hair smelled like mandarins. I put that in the notes. You might have read them. Next, I unrolled her clothes and placed them on top of her body. This isn't state protocol, but I like to get a sense of the person's life. Makes the job more personal.
Thank you, Jess. It's amazing. The first person voice when you're writing an I story, it's so unpredictable whether or not that I is going to give you heat and it's going to give you kind of narrative purchase on the page. Well, when you began this story, did you get a sense of energy very quickly from the character?
Yeah, I knew only that I wanted it to be set in a morgue, and I knew the end of it. I knew what I needed that character to do. And so that required a certain type of character, to make you believe that she was going to do that. So that was kind of, once I had that, and I knew that I wanted the voice to be sort of continuous. I didn't know that it was going to be so much of a flow and almost very few sentences. It's quite kind of flowy on-y. But I did know that I wanted that really kind of long sentences, someone who doesn't know how to stop talking.
Yeah. A destination is a really useful thing to have in mind, isn't it? When you start when you start a story, you kind of have a map. But it's kind of very important as well. You have the destination and maybe where you're starting from with the voice, but nothing in between. I find is most useful. Does that strike you as a way that you approach a story usually?
Definitely, yeah. And it kind of just meant that, there's loads of it that didn't go in. There's loads of rambling that didn't make it. So yeah, I guess that's basically it. As long as I had that ending, I kind of knew where I needed to get to. But you avoid going to that ending. Yeah. I did anyway. It was kind of there's so much swerving around it because you didn't want to tell that actual story. So it was.
And the fascination with morgues, has this been a long-standing preoccupation, or?
No more than your average kind of fascination, I suppose. I just, once you start researching it, it's not nice to say, well, no, it is the morgue. It was just more the mundane life in a morgue. Yeah. the things, because they're often set like there's these very creepy kind of different settings, and the more I found like in doing the research, they're more in film and television. You'd see them than you would in fiction. And like what is more interesting to me is like getting annoyed about the embalmer fluid than the actual kind of creepy setting, because if you're in it every day, embalming fluid or formaldehyde, it's going to be like, well, why isn't that on the shelf, like that? And that kind of seems more what I wanted to immerse myself in with it.
The detail is very kind of finely drawn in and very believable. So you did actually research quite a bit on.
Like I'm still being sold embalming fluid on, on Google. Yeah, just in like there's loads you can. I mean, that's kind of the benefit of I guess writing now. And I mean, I've never been to New Mexico where the story is set, or more that you can just spend ages kind of in Reddit and like reading all the stuff that people have said about working in a morgue. And there's loads of kind of, I mean, you could get lost. You could go too deep into a morgue.
For sure. Do you tend to research as you're writing, or do you do the research first and then begin to write, or?
Yeah, I did all the research sort of first, and then you sometimes have to go back if there's little things that have come up. But mostly, I kind of did the research for maybe a month, and then sat down to write the story.
I find sometimes a story won't work for me unless the character has found the proper stage where they should be. So it turned into the Southwest for you. It's New Mexico. Was there a moment when you realized, oh wow, this is down there where I've never been, or was it just something that clicked?
I think I was actually pretty deep in the morgue world at that time, and I was thinking like, if no one is gonna, for some reason, like when you're writing, well, maybe I'm the only one who gets very paranoid. I'm like, well, I can't let the mortuary community down. I can't. There are a lot of people that I want to disappoint. So I was like, this has to be accurate. And I think like someone asked me why it was set in New Mexico, and I was like, I think at the time I was like, that's the only place this would be believable. That is the only place that this, but like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But just when you're very deep in the research, I mean, it couldn't be set in Ireland because it couldn't be set. I can't remember why I looked at setting in Montreal, and that wouldn't have worked either due to mortuary regulations. So it was just something small that I got fixated on, and then was like, okay, New Mexico.
But that gives you so much. Then suddenly you've got the whole kind of telenovela world and all that you can bring into the story, and that gives it kind of a texture. So have you been mainly working on short fiction over your last few years in Dublin? I see in your bio there's mention of a novel as well.
Yeah, I started a novel during the lockdown, and that's in the works as well. So mostly short stories that have been finished and completed, and that. But
I forgot to read your bio at the start. I'm doing it all backwards today. Moved to Dublin in 2015 from Montreal. Awarded Arts Council bursaries in 19 and 20. Finishing a collection of fluid themed short stories, and as well as a novel. Fluid themed. So we have the embalming fluids here, of course. So it's do you want to expand in any way about the fluid themes?
I suppose it just is kind of, each of the stories that I've been working on loosely has to do with fluid. So there will be a central kind of fluid, and then the story develops around that. So whether it's formaldehyde in this story, another is breast milk, another is the slip that you use in making pottery, another is diarrhea, and another story, like, so each starts with a fluid, and then the kind of character is kind of moved out of that. It's very like, there's no limits or restrictions to it. It just is sort of the way that I've been working. It's kind of been fun to do.
And have you found Dublin to be amenable to be in as a place, and to write in and to work in?
I have, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always the money thing in Dublin as a city, but in terms of like, there's enormous amount of, like, I remember when I moved from Montreal, there's enormous amount of respect for literature here, and maybe more of a, not that there's not in Montreal, it's just more of a performing arts city. So dance and theater and things like that, music. And that's here as well. But I think there's just, even when you're talking to someone in the shop, like they would, know a poet. I remember hearing that like Russia and Ireland are the only countries where most people know their poets.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's been really good. I've found it great.
Yeah. And we're going to talk to Susanne a little later about growing up in different languages. Did you grow up did you come from a francophone community?
No, so I grew up. My parents speak English, but I did go to school in French.
Right. Okay.
And then I living in Montreal. You speak both all the time, and Susanne's piece obviously brought back a lot of the dissonance that you feel learning two languages. So.
Okay, thanks so much, Jess. We'll come back to you in a while and talk about other stuff in the book this year. We're going to zoom along to Galway City and talk to Alan McMonagle. Alan, it's lovely to find you in the essay form for winter papers this year and on a topic very close to my own concerns as well as a practiced and accomplished insomniac myself. Tell us a little bit about the piece before you maybe give us a quick reading from it.
Yeah, it's kind of it has a binary title, if you like, to it. I remember getting an email from your co-editor. She asked me had I any essay notions, and I don't know, my fast answer to myself was no, but I ran off a list that was very quickly became a shopping list, and Olivia in her wisdom distilled or reduced this down to basically one item that was listed in the initial email: insomnia.
Yeah,
and more or less.
I think I might have been prompting her as well.
Oh yeah. So she said, "What about insomnia and creativity?" And I sort of went, "Oh, okay. Well, I know I can do the insomnia bit, and I suppose I've been making up things for quite a while now, so maybe I might be able to tap into the creativity.
Like we know you as a novelist and a short story writer. Have you written many essays over the years?
This is probably my first, substantial published piece in the essay form.
Yeah.
So it was very much new ground,
Yeah. It's very different, isn't it? It's very different.
And I'll admit, I was bristling a little bit, and I was floundering a little bit, and I was casting about, for ways into it.
Yeah.
But I recalled an email I'd had from a writer friend based in Melbourne just after the Christmas. It's always around this time of year when my sleeping goes off the charts altogether.
Yeah.
And she sent me an image. All it was an image of a brain, infrared on black background.
Yeah.
And she mentioned this sudden writing project that she was trying to get going. And she asked me for 400, sudden words.
Yeah.
And she said, "Don't think about it, just do it." And all I was drawn to was the subject's shut eye. He was asleep. Yeah. and just that thing that you were talking about, this pandemic making us look a little closer to home. So I just started writing, and I just came out in a slab of prose, not unlike Jess's story, And it was, it came in at about 400 words. So I sent it off to her, and I recall this when I got the prompt from Olivia. So I used that, if you like, as a way into
as an
exploration of insomnia, which usually has a negative sort of tone to it. But
it can also be a strangely magical place.
Well,
give us a blast.
This is it. I'll actually read from the get-go. Just suits the timing. It's a few days into the new year, and a writer friend based in Melbourne wants me to contribute to our sudden writing project. She has sent me an image of a brain, image number 30, taken in profile, infrared on black background, with lower regions of the brain lit up. She wants 400 sudden words from me, and all I am drawn to is the subject's shut-eye. These post-festive nights, I crave some shut-eye and simultaneously dread bedtime because I know sleep won't come easy, if it comes at all. Now it's Friday night, kicking back, and there's a Bowie celebration that gets me past the midnight hour. Classic clips, vintage footage, favorite songs. I pour glasses of red and affect to sing along. Blue, blue, electric blue, that's the color of my room. Celebration over, I scroll channels and suggest a late film to my partner. Too late, she's already bedbound, sleeping easy. I find something passable, a so-so comedy set at a writer's retreat somewhere in rural England. 3 a.m, don't care how the flick ends, and I'm scrambling to queue up something else. More comedy, quiz show, nature trails. Where is that train journey that lasts for 36 hours? Nothing doing, and besides, I'm getting restless, twitching in the chair. I pace circles around the sitting room, the kitchen. Thoughts pinball, torrents race laps inside my head. I need some air. Open the patio door and offer my helter-skelter self to the 4 a.m. moon. Why not go a little further? Jacket on and take to the empty street. Out onto the main road, down the hill, past the Sleepy Eye Hotel. Pace circles round the roundabout. Continue to the end of the road. Home again and try to sit. Nothing doing, still twitchy. Stand at the breakfast bar and start again into the Jonathan Coe novel, The House of Sleep. A main character hasn't slept in 14 years. He's a film reviewer, and early in the book, he attends a week-long film festival, watches without sleep 134 films. This miracle of artistic endurance lands him an entry in the Guinness Book of Records. Impressed, I entertain notions of having a go at outdoing this fictional feat. If nothing else, it will while away future hours as I line up the 135 films I will watch, paying particular attention to the final record-breaking title. 6 a.m. Move the chair in front of the TV, sit into it, grip the arms, not so restless now. What to watch? What will see me through until the dawn? I think of the Marilyn Monroe documentary I've recently recorded. What are you afraid of? Marilyn is asked. I'm afraid of the night, she says. I'm afraid it will never end. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, well, one of the things that comes through very strongly in the essay, I think, is the way sleeplessness is such a huge looming thing in the life of the insomniac. You know, we're thinking about it all the time. You know, is to like go to be one of those nights. But you managed to create a kind of a lovely, kind of hopeful atmosphere about the whole thing as well, in the sense that you bring in the idea of the way insomnia can be a creative feed, and the way that mad, crazy 4 a.m., 5 a.m. brain can start to be in some ways useful. Is it quite a regular practice for you to be making the bones of stories and novels in the small hours?
It would have been very early on, you know, early days territory. I think I had this again, which you know, tapping into that magical notion, this romantic thing that, you know, it's not going to happen until after dark. So it's you almost, you know, deliberately wait until as late as possible. You know, it could be the midnight hour, and you are arranging everything. You know, whether it's magic stones, candles, and you know, a lamp suitably close to the page, and you're expecting, right, this is it. I've created the right atmosphere. It's just gonna pour out. Of course, it doesn't always work like that. I remember when I was moving from the short story form to having to go at a serious stab, you know, writing a first novel. You know, the whole idea of writing a novel just felt really daunting to me. So I felt that I might have to sort of switch things up, mix things up a little bit. So I started getting up really early, actually. I would literally get up as soon as I woke up. I wouldn't even, take a full breakfast, wouldn't finish the tea or the toast, just to try and get something, make some inroads into the day, before it gets its hooks into you, and that whatever chances you are going to be waylaid for a variety of reasons. I remember reading that around the time that I think they said Tolstoy wrote by day and Dostoevsky wrote by night. I've tried to be both, I guess. It's the final answer.
Yeah, it's a peculiar thing. I'm more typically a morning writer now. But for the last novel, I wrote mainly at night because I wasn't sleeping at all, kind of a thing. So I said, "Fuck it, I might as well just do something while I'm up." But you're a very different writer at different times of the day.
I think so. Yeah. And I reverted again for my second novel for Laura Cassidy's Walk of Fame. There was a lot of scenes that were set at night, and Laura, the title character, she does an awful lot of ruminating, and I find the nighttime can be, a blessing and a curse for ruminating.
Yeah.
You can send yourself to a dark place very, very quickly if you let it have its way over you.
Well, it seems to be a kind of a time in the dark of the night where the mind is naturally inclined to go into narrative making mode, for good and very often for ill as well. The stuff you start to conjure, and the dawn comes like such a relief, and such.
It does, yeah. It does. It's I think I quoted her in later on into the piece. It's Fleur Adcock, lovely New Zealand poet. It's 5 a.m. All the worst things come in and stand icily at the foot of the bed, looking worse and worse and worse. And like eventually I get to the stage where, right, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to try and put a different spin on this. So downstairs, down to the kitchen. And you're having these conversations with imaginary characters that ultimately become characters in a piece of short fiction or indeed a novel.
I do think insomnia is more prevalent amongst creative people of whatever stripe, whether it's writers or visual artists or whatever. And it's that thing. It's nothing got to do with not being tired or anything, isn't it? No. It's that thing. As soon as the light is switched off, the head just starts to kind of race and starts to motor.
Sometimes, I think you're right. Sometimes it's not even so much an inability to sleep. It's really not wanting to go to sleep because something has switched on and it wants you to be present and pay attention.
I guess like I always maintain, as so many people maintain, that your creative work, your fiction or whatever it is, it comes from your subconscious, the same place your dreams come from. That's where it's all kind of sourced from. Don DeLillo has that great phrase for it, the kind of the dream melt, the puddles of dream melt or something is where you work from. So it's a natural place. I notice, I wonder, do you do this? I start to, when I'm reading biography or history, I start to note insomniacs kind of in a very favorable way. There's another one. Right. There's one of our team.
Yes, he's one of us. I mean, I was reading some of Roberto Bolaño's short stories.
I bet he was an insomniac.
And he has a couple of characters, and he's very pointedly, ensures that he gets in references to their inability or lack of sleep.
There's a great riff in Jenny Offel's novel Department of Speculation, where she talks about being a horrendous insomniac, and she takes lots of really heavy sleeping tablets, still can't sleep, and she thinks, I must be a complete fucking genius altogether. Nothing can put me down. Nothing can
defy sleep. No matter what. I know. It's great.
But it's you mentioned that it's this time of the year quite often, isn't it? That with our kind of Northern European maritime kind of lack of light and the sheer murkiness. Things get started. I bought a happy lamp quite recently, to simulate daylight. You know, it only arrived today, so I've only had about half an hour of it. So it's too early to say whether it's working yet. But I'll try anything. And just before we move on to Susanne, are you tempted more so in the direction of writing essays now, Alan, than previously? I find them much harder work than writing fiction. You have to kind of figure out what it is you're writing as you go along, sort of a thing in here.
I think so, but again, I think it's that thing about embracing, uncertainty and embracing new ground. And I think that's ultimately, what the essay is. It's an exploration, and you may not come up with definitive answers to the questions or to the topics that are of interest to you. But I think if you can certainly invigorate the questions or animate the questions, that might be enough to get you a good ways towards your destination, that vague destination shimmering, looming there on the horizon. Yeah.
Can I ask, Alan, is there more fiction stirring at the moment as well? Are you working on stuff?
Lots of stuff in various stages of development. Some stories. I tend to have too much fun with beginnings, Kevin. So there's always a handful of projects, stories disguised as novels, and novels masquerading as plays, and even the odd piece of doggerel that are vying for attention. I find what I've been doing is just following the energy during the pandemic,
it can take a while to figure out what something actually is.
Yeah. It's like it's underwater for a long time. It takes a while before you can actually discern what it is or what it wants to be. Yeah.
We'll come back to you in a little bit, Alan, and talk about other things in the book. I'm again getting all the biographies back to front. Alan's two novels to date are Ithaca and Laura Cassidy's Walk of Fame, which came out in 2020 at the start of this long, strange, lovely period that we're going through. Thanks so much, Alan. And we're going to move along now and talk to Susanne Stich. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, but this piece you're going to talk about is all about language difficulties anyway. Susanne, I'm going to get your bio up front, unlike the other ones. Susanne lives in Donegal, shortlisted for the Bristol Short Story Prize, published in The Stinging Fly and Ambit, and a finalist in the Irish Writers' Centre's Novel Fair. She's also a recipient of an Arts Council bursary. So this essay about growing up in two languages, essentially, and moving from one to the other in this great forest of words back and forth all the time. Tell us about how this piece came to be for you.
Well, I started only a couple of years ago maybe 10 years now, it's more than a couple, but to write fiction in English, to give this a go. Because I was living in Ireland and I was reading a lot of German, but mostly English books. I was talking English most of the day, talking German on the phone to friends and family, but it seemed I was cut off from Germany. And then I thought, why don't I give this a go, writing in English, which happened slowly, but it did happen for me. But I suddenly realized, hold on a minute, I've never actually written about this particular thing that I'm writing in English while I was born with this other language, which is German, because it seems such an obvious thing. It's like the elephant in the room in my life. Writing is so important for me. And for a long time, I was just too embarrassed to write fiction in English. I just thought it's not possible because there are all these ideas about your mother tongue. You can only write in your mother tongue, which of course is actually, I wouldn't quite say it's nonsense, because there's an important thing in that as well. But so many people nowadays do write in a second language. And there's sometimes people mention Beckett and Joseph Conrad and people like that. And that makes me, it's in the essay as well, I talk about that, but it's a much broader group of people than just those two or three that we often hear about. So I started thinking about writing an essay, and there were certain images that came into my head, like the idea of language being like a forest, and also the assumptions of people who talk to me and hear my accent, which has gone through all these different metamorphoses over the years. So I just wrote down individual sentences at the start, and then eventually it all came together as a structure for an essay, and I took it from there.
Fantastic. Can you give us a little piece from it, a little extract from it?
Yes, of course. So I'm gonna use my glasses here. I'm reading the opening. Squirrel conscience thermometer. Until English became a school subject when I was 10, the language surrounded me like a secret mixed forest. In the kitchen of our Nuremberg flat, where I'm right now, my mother used to listen to an ABBA tape while doing housework. Other than some words and phrases which she, who'd left school at 14 and never learned English, explained to me, SOS, I have a dream, money, money, money. Neither of us understood what these songs were about. It didn't stop us from singing along to the refrains with plenty of humming in between. In the background, my father, who'd been a child in 1945, droned on about the Americans, on how they'd saved us Germans from ourselves. In another room, my music-obsessed older brother's vinyl and accompanying posters had me standing face to face with Freddie Mercury and Angus Young long before I could read. English had something to do with all of this. It was hard to make sense of, but in the kindergarten years, it formed a big part of my routine. On the radio, 2 other songs grabbed my attention. Sorry, I'm a Lady, and Yes, Sir, I Can Boogie. Affinities kicked in. Words streamed into me like shoots taking root. In primary school, I started tracing the letters on my brother's record covers, still clueless as to what they meant. News of the world, jailbreak. And I'll leave it here.
Thank you. There's that moment in the essay also when you land in Dublin, I think in your late teens maybe, and work as an au pair. For somebody already stuck in the imponderables of the English language, to arrive into the midst of Irish people adds complication, I guess. Was that the case with you?
Definitely. I mean, I knew so very little about Ireland. I had a teacher of mine had studied there, and I was so fascinated by the stories he told us about. He read us bits from A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man in German, and he told us about Donegal, and I was just naive and impressionable at the time, and I thought this would be a great place to go and check out. So I found myself there working as an au pair, aged 19. And I was like a sponge soaking up everything, but I got a pretty quick idea of language issues being a big issue on this small island, which was, I was often told, the size of Bavaria, where I'm from. But the country seemed so full of contradiction. And I remember hearing the news in the morning, the Jerry Ryan show, and before that, the news. This was what the family were listening to, and there were a lot of things happening in Belfast at the time. This was before the actual, before the Good Friday Agreement and the ceasefires. So there was the Shankill Road bombing, I think. And so there were a lot of things going on, and I just absorbed it all. I tried to learn as quickly as I could, and I had all kinds of guides and people along the way who spoke to me about different aspects of Irish culture and language. It was definitely a very interesting journey. I remember also seeing, this is in the essay, sitting in Bewley's and sometimes sitting Sinead O'Connor sitting there with Brenton Kennelly, who I at the time didn't know. Brenton Kennelly I didn't know, I knew Sinead O'Connor. And it was just incredible to me, coming from a pretty big city, Nuremberg, to be in the Dublin, in the Irish capital in Dublin, and seeing people that I knew from the media. In Nuremberg, it might be a big city, but you hardly ever see somebody you might know from the media. There were all kinds of things like that.
It becomes evident that Dublin is quite a small town.
Yes,
it's
pretty quickly, yeah.
in some regards, quite quickly. Now, what comes across really beautifully in the essay, Susanna, is the sense that the moments of kind of understanding when you're in a new language, that those moments where there's a sudden shift and you're starting to get little bits of clarity and little bits of focus, that those moments are kind of imperceptible. You don't really notice them as they're happening, but suddenly the view is opening up a little bit in the language. And often a way in for you was through music and through film. Also, you very bravely approached an open mic poetry session in Dublin, I think.
Yes, I did on Sunday nights. Well, a friend of mine had told me about a writing showcase in La Cave Wine Bar in South Ann Street in Dublin, where anybody could read, and people were absolutely lovely. Most of them were twice my age and older, and God knows what I was reading. Like, I had written these short pieces in German and I translated them into English, and this is described in the essay in great detail, different responses. There were some German people in the audience who thought it was strange for a young German woman to write in English. This was the fear I described earlier, whereas the Irish people, for some reason, were very supportive of me. And I think that was somehow the seed for me to go back to when I decided to give this a proper shot and take writing in English, see it as an option, and follow it up and take it very seriously and see where and explore it properly, rather than tell myself, no, I can't do that, because of this, I call it a motley crew of inner critics that would stop you from exploring something that you really feel you should, just because you're told it's impossible by certain traditional voices that drone on in your head.
And what where you come to as well in the essay is that peculiar experience when you start to feel almost a stranger. The longer you've been in Ireland, the more you've been writing in English, you start to feel like almost a visitor to your mother tongue, to the language you grew up with, and you have to make a kind of a determined effort, you said in the essay, with podcasts and stuff to stay in the German world also.
That's the thing, you know, it's a journey with language. It always changes. It's like this liquid thing, and I definitely have to make an effort to stay in touch with my mother tongue now. Visits like this are important. I'm really immersed in German right now, so I was almost nervous about coming on, and I thought, well, I speak differently than I would when I'm in a show and where I usually live. So yeah, it takes an effort. Like my journal, for instance, I make a point of writing in German. Everything else I write in English now, and yeah, it requires a discipline. You know, you have to tell yourself, okay, you love English books, like English language books, and you read widely, but you also have to continue reading in German. And there's my Germanness that I grew up with, but there's also this caring and looking after the language, be it the one you learn as a child as a second language, or be it the one you kind of left behind in a certain way, but you're still very much shaped by it, and you're still speaking in it, of course, but you're speaking it less than you did when you first grew up.
One of the things I've become aware of working with people when translating my work into other languages, that the most difficult kind of area tends to be humor. And I'm always asking translators, is it funny? You know, is it still funny when you translate it into French or German or whatever? Like Irish humor can be very deadpan and straight faced, and it must be very difficult initially to get a read on when people are taking the piss here and when they're winding you up.
Yes, totally. I mean, it's I genuinely get a sense German people always love the Irish humor. Even now when I see them coming maybe the first time to Ireland, and I remember how I felt about it, and it seems so refreshing. In Germany, like, well, the way I was brought up, like I always looked to other cultures for for humor. We weren't exactly known for our humor for all kinds of reasons. So I had watched certain comedies, but then being in the country and seeing the Irish cracking their jokes unfold in real time, it almost took me sometimes a few seconds when everybody else had finished laughing. I finally understood what had been said, and it is a very different. The Irish have such a great way with language because it's an adopted language ultimately, and so they had to make it. They had to make it their own by introducing the imagery and the double entendre and all kinds of things, all kinds of layers, and bringing in the landscape and bringing in Irish, the actual Irish language, and sort of assimilating it into the English.
That strange underlay that's there. Beckett famously said he switched to writing in French because it took the lyrical impulse out of his work, that when he was writing in English he couldn't resist that kind of Irish impulse towards lyricism, and so that was gone. Well, do you feel that what does your short story gain if you write it in English rather than German, or what does it lose?
I do feel it gains a certain dynamic that the German for me never had. Like, I've been writing short stories and texts since I was about 14 or 16. And it was all often very conceptually driven, very idea driven, very philosophical. There was very little plot in it. It was all about great ideas and certain, it's almost very static. And I thought the English language, over time, I've discovered that brings to me a movement, a sort of fluidity that I wouldn't have had in the German language. But for me, the core of writing is voice, especially in my prose. And I find I feel at this stage I have developed a voice that is the voice I'm really looking for, even though it's in a second language, because it combines certain longings, you could say, that I have had, which are more image-based. Because even as a child, I did read, but I wasn't the greatest reader compared to others. I was very much influenced by music and film and so on. So to me, English lends itself well to absorb and depict these influences, and it's easier to write without frills or it's not as heady, and it's very much my own experience based on all these things I've done along the way. I could see other people finding this weird and it might not work for them. But for me now, I've been at this for so long that I've sort of developed a certain faith in working in this way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susanna. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Just as we come to the kind of the end of our presentation for you here today, I want to go back to each of the contributors and just talk about, we've asked them to pick another piece that caught their eye or their ear in this year's edition, number 7 of Winter Papers. So Jess, what did you come up with?
Yeah, I chose "And Now With Feeling," Claire Langan interview and conversation with Christine Leach. Yeah,
Claire Langan, a kind of a very hard to classify filmmaker, I guess, someone who really steers her own course. What struck you about the piece?
I just thought it was a really magical sort of interview, in that they kind of talk about the things that you can't really explain in creation. So they weren't talking about, craft or anything like that. And I tend to be more interested in interviews, particularly like that aren't writers. Like, I'd be more interested in like filmmakers or something, because I think it's just like fascinating. At one point she talks about how they have 2 wolves, an owl and a raven, and an animal handler like involved in this film. Like, I mean, we have pens and paper, maybe.
I know. Yeah, I always think writers always really envy visual artists. It looks like much more fun. There's a really great quote towards the end of the piece where she talks about hope in work, where she says you kind of feel like you have a moral obligation to have hope or want to have hope, and especially right now there's a necessity for hope. And I guess she's talking in a way about the kind of maybe the sense of reprieve or solace we get at the strange kind of period we're going through by turning back to our work and turning back to our creative places. Has going back to writing stories helped you through the whole pandemic experience in your own case?
Yeah, like, I mean, I love what she says about hope. It's such a chilled out definition of hope. It's just kind of like, I would just say, like, you keep moving forward, and that's hope. So in the sense that, like, I think that reading that made me think about what I've been doing, and I'm like, well, I have been doing stuff, and that's moving forward. So I must be hopeful on some level.
Yeah, and like on that as well, I guess I always think that the only definition of success as any kind of artist is if you're starting the next thing, you know, if you're moving on to a new story or a new project, or if you can keep going, that seems to be great. But yeah, we'd urge everyone to seek out Claire Langan's work, and it's a really thoughtful, beautiful interview that Christine Leach has done. Thanks, Jess. Alan, you picked some fiction.
I did, yeah. I chose Kathleen Murray's short story, Perfect is Too Much. I really liked the title, actually, for starters. And I really liked, we're just plunged straight into the narrative. We meet two characters, Annie and Gary. They're very much on Skid Row, and I'm not even sure they know where they're going to bed down that particular night, the day we meet them. Where's their next meal going to come from? And crucially, where's their next drink going to come from? The dialogue is fantastic. There's just a motor on it all the time. And it, it zones in, it touches on, whoever fleetingly their own personal tragedies, and then circles back out again into the more immediate situation that they find themselves in.
There's a bravura finish as well, which we won't give away.
No,
it's just like these are people, or these seem to be people who you pass by every day on the streets of Dublin or Galway or any Irish city or town. But she just really embodies them. Just the engine of dialogue going through the story is stunning. I think it's
with humor and empathy, and this fantastic swerve, if you like, just about halfway in, when the Gary character, after a couple of false starts, he improvises a fishing rod with the aid of a runner and a shoelace, and lo and behold, he drops it into a drain, and he gets a bite, and not just a bite, he gets this beautiful, gleaming, shimmering, jewel-like fish, and a talking fish at that,
and away we go.
And it's just a wonderful. I always admire these writers, these gambits, these leaps that writers attempt. They don't always come off, but I think it's in the. Writing is often about taking risks.
In lesser hands, the story, could take an awful wrong turn.
But it's great, this fish straight away announces himself as the fish of knowledge. Very much not to be mistaken with the like the genie wish, who is the bestower of 3 wishes, which I'm sure would stand a better chance of getting Gary and Annie out of the bind that they are in. But nevertheless, it steers them towards towards that all-important next drink. And the story then gradually and inevitably moves towards that beautiful final image and moment. It's really deftly handled and deftly done,
And just noting from Kathleen Murray's biography at the front of the book as well, that her first novel will be published in 2022, which is something to be very excited about, I think.
Oh yeah, it is. It sounds like she's leaps and bounds ahead. Actually, the story put me in mind of a Mark Twain quote that I landed on quite early on into my writing adventure / misadventure. You're submitting out stories and hoping that you'll catch the eye of an editor out there, but Twain said, if you write a story about a fish, send it to a place where there are no fish. And
Yeah.
just with
That's
Kathleen's fishing knowledge in mind.
Words to steer by. Yeah, no, I've been struck by Kathleen's stories have been appearing over the years in like the Sting and Fly on several occasions in the Dublin Review, and always going wow, and very various, very different, but she just has that great dialogue engine in her stories, which is phenomenal. And Susanne, you picked an interview.
Yes, I did pick The Image and the Word with Bernard McLafferty, done by Andrew Meehan. I love Bernard McLafferty's work, especially Grace Notes. I heard him read in Cork at the Cork Festival in Galway. I think it was in 1997, from this novel, and there was it really struck a chord with me. I love anything about the creative process, and in this interview, he just says a few things that really registered with me. I love all the pieces, all the interview pieces in particular, but this one struck with me when he says something about first there is the voice, and then there is the page, and then there is the endless editing and filing away, and he talks about his novel Midwinter Break, where he talked about, I think, 16 years of subtracting, of adding, of changing, putting in other things, taking them out. I loved the way he talks about time in the creative process, because I think we live in such fast-paced times where it's often presented as if writing a novel can be done in a year or two, and maybe sometimes it can, of course, but I think there are novels that need a longer amount of time, and I was kind of reassured when I heard that. And also, I loved what he said about the author often not knowing. I mean, we hear this a lot, but it's just so good to hear it re-said by authors that are well established, how we don't know where a character might be going. And he quotes the famous thing in the famous detail in Flannery O'Connor's story, Good Country People, about Helga having the wooden leg and the Bible salesman coming in and stealing the wooden leg. And Flannery O'Connor didn't know that this was where the story was going to go. It's such a good example of having the courage to let your characters lead you where they need to lead you. And I just loved it, reading that again, when it was also, I read it on a day where just everything seemed to echo with me.
Yeah, he has a lovely in his fiction or whatever he does, but in the interviews he has a lovely calming presence somehow. Bernard McLafferty, I find he just calms me down when I hear him talk or read from his work or anything. There was a bit in it that really struck me where he talks about when he moved from Northern Ireland to Scotland, I think in the 80s maybe, and being really lonesome for this kind of his like-minded kind of young artists and writers who he had been spending all that time with in Belfast, and suddenly he was lost. And it brought home to me how important it is that to have like-minded people to talk through your work with and to operate with. And I guess it's something that we're all missing a little bit at the moment, when our movement is still quite constrained, and we can't get around quite in the way that we need to just yet. So it's it was a lot of the things that rang true in it.
Yeah,
but thank you, Susanna. And I think we're about there. So just for me, it's just to thank Emer Hurley and everyone at the West Cork Festival for having us today. Jess, Raymon, and Alan McMonagle and Susanne Stich. It's been great fun. As we speak, as we record this, we're not quite at the solstice moment yet, but by the time you see this, we'll be heading for spring, like a shot. It's all going in one direction only, and it'll be wonderful, hopefully, to see you all at real in the flesh literary festivals in West Cork and elsewhere over the coming year. So thanks again to all the contributors, and thanks very much, Emer and West Cork, for having us.
And thank you very much to all of you. That was absolutely gorgeous event, and I really can't wait for people to see it. One thing I forgot to ask Kevin before the event was, at the time of speaking, are there issues still available?
Not on the website. We sold out, which is lovely news. But there are in the shops. I think most shops have a few still yet,
Okay.
so hopefully at Christmas they'll still have a few around.
Yeah.
O'Mahony's in Limerick have about 20. So
Okay.
Olivia told me a while ago. Yeah, so it's nice. It's been flying out the door, so it's been great. So thanks everyone for doing it. I'm sorry we can't go drinking this year, but like our plan is to have a big party next year for like the 3 years, for the last 2 and for next year, so that we'll all go completely mad.
Well, we'll all be there, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to thank everybody who tuned in tonight, and to wish everybody a happy new year by the time you're watching this. And all going well, we'll be gathering in person in Bantry between the 8th and the 15th of July 2022. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. And thank you, and thank you, and good night to all of you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.